of random.
What up, y'all? Welcome to my tier list. I am your host, Vegas, host of Hip Hop Now podcast, as well as That Time in Hip Hop, here on the B-Roll Network. And tier lists seem to be all the rage, right? So I decided to create one. And I had a couple of ideas, I still have them. Maybe I'll do those. But I said, how about we just go ahead and do something interesting? Jay-Z and Nas are like the pinnacle of old school hip hop artists who still are relevant, right? But a lot of people really only focus on their new material, not really familiar with their catalog. So I figured, why don't we just break down where these albums within their catalog stand? Now, couple of caveats, right? Obviously, Jay-Z and Nas are both soloists, but in order to mix things up a little bit, I decided to include a collabo album from both. Don't worry, R. Kelly does not appear, as well as in non-traditional album. In the case of Jay-Z, it's his MTV Unplugged album. In the case of Nas, it's the Lost Tapes. The tier starts at, of course, classic, then it goes down to dope, then it goes down to good, then it goes to this shit okay, and then it goes to hot garbage. So, without further ado, let's begin. Subscribe, like, comment. Let's do this. So let's start with the debut albums, right? Now let's start with the one that everybody likes to talk about, Illmatic. Let's not even waste time. Classic, Stop Playing With Me. Classic, one of the greatest hip-hop albums of all time, for all times, for a number of reasons for which I'm not going to name all here, but just remember the other hot albums in his catalog wouldn't be anything without Illmatic. For Jay-Z, his debut was Reasonable Doubt. And for me, hold up. Wilding out with the touchscreen. I should have used the mouse. What's going on? No, we don't want to do this shit. This shit okay. We're going to go to classic. Jay-Z, Reasonable Doubt, classic. What else would it be at this point in time? It's classic to me because it aged like fine wine. It's one of the most classiest hip hop albums. Like the beats give off a certain vibe. Jay-Z captured something to me with his debut album that was different from all the other rappers around that time that made him unique. Where Nas and Biggie and Black Moon and Wu-Tang Clan, and I'm going to use a Wire reference, took the Stringer Bell approach. Jay-Z's Reasonable Doubt is not Stringer Bell. I mix it up. Took the Avon Barksdale approach, whereas Jay-Z's Reasonable Doubt takes the Stringer Bell approach. So smooth, read the Rob Report type thing. So let's get into it. Now, I'm not really going to go into order because I'm pretty sure I'm going to start getting stuck and lost, but I'm going to try. Nas, It Was Written. I think It Was Written is dope. I think it's dope. I can't say it's a classic because there are a number of records on there that I skip. You know what I'm saying? Whereas the other joints, I don't really skip anything. That being new Illmatic and Reasonable Doubt. But when it comes to Nas, It Was Written, I feel like it's very close to a classic, but there are just some records on there that could have been left off. All right, for Jay-Z, what we got here? This thing is not even in order. In My Lifetime, Volume 1. I'm going to say this was dope. For a long time, this album was considered to be Jay-Z's whack album. And I never understood that because the whack records on there are to a minimum. And honestly, some of the records that people consider whack, like The City's Mine, I didn't mind that record that much. But this is the album that had Friend or Foe 2, Where I'm From, 1,000,001 Questions. It had a couple of joints on here, you know what I'm saying? So I thought it was dope. At the time, I played Imaginary Players. I played it to death, so I have no problem with that album. Now, for Nas, we get into I Am. And this album is good. I feel like and it's not a pattern here. I'm just freestyling, y'all. So this is live, but I feel like I Am was good. Take out the fact that the album was bootleg and the songs that were supposed to be on there didn't make it. We get it. We get it. But I felt like it did enough, but it was just it was fine, especially when you go back to it, you realize there's a lot of dope lyrics, there's a lot of dope songs on there. Obviously there's some that you can skip, but nevertheless I felt like it was a good album, that point blank. Jay-Z, now Hard Knock Life, I think this album was dope. And I know a lot of hip hop heads at that time felt like, yo, but all those features, I loved it, to be honest. Sure, I didn't feel like this was going to be Jay-Z's last album, so I wasn't so pressed at all the features, man. But Jay-Z was at the top of his game lyrically, and he had hits after hit. And I'm not talking about Can I Get It? That was like a commercial hit that I never really liked. There was a lot of dope records on here. The guest appearances were dope. I mean, what more can I say? I know a lot of people though will knock that album down as a result. Next and I'm not even gonna waste time. Hot Garbage. Nas's Nostradamus, another victim of the bootlegging that occurred before the I Am Nostradamus was supposed to drop. This album is all filler except for like Project Window. There's probably 3 records I like on here, and it's a damn shame how bad this album turned out to me. I couldn't believe it. I was like, yo, is this the end, or is this just his whack one? I wasn't sure, but this album didn't grow on me over time. It hasn't aged well. It is not one of his best works at all, if you ask me. S. Carter. I feel like this album was good. Now, some people would say, yo, but this album was dope. I don't know, because I felt like there was a lot of records on here I skipped. Now, don't get me wrong. So Ghetto and all the, Put Your Hands, all the records that we all know to be dope on this album are dope. But this is an album that I almost never go back to. And when I do go back to it, I have my favorites, and I tend to skip a lot. But again, Jay-Z at the height of his powers as an MC, just killing the game. You know what I'm saying? Literally. Now I'm noticing there's an album I don't have in my little group here that's missing, and poof, just like that, we have the album. The album that was missing here was Jay-Z's Dynasty album, and I feel like this album was good. Really inching towards dope, I must say. Like really inching towards it, because I really like this album. I liked a lot of the guest appearances. I feel like it was what Hard Knock Life was prior to that, but I think it was more focused on saying, well, here are the people who represent. It's a compilation album, and I think that was kind of smart for Jay-Z to kind of kill any fatigue you would have with him as an artist. And he did his thing with it, needless to say. Now let's get into some other joints real quick, and another one here, Stillmatic. I think Stillmatic is a classic. I think the timing of the album, I think all of the records, Ether, obviously. I think this album was everything it needed to be at the time. It was the perfect comeback from Nostradamus. That being a whack album, people feeling like Nas is done, Jay-Z dissing Nas. Not only does Nas come back and basically beats Jay-Z in a battle, don't fight me, and Rockefeller MCs to a certain extent, because he dissed all of them. But nevertheless, the other tracks on there, except for Braveheart Party, were really dope. You know what I'm saying? And it felt like, man, this dude never left. He just had a bad album. That was it. So I feel like Stillmatic is a classic. The Blueprint, I got to put it up here too. I feel like The Blueprint was a classic for Jay-Z. Now, when it first dropped, I didn't necessarily feel that way. I felt like Jay-Z was a little bit lazy with the lyrics. And when I say that, I know some people are like, what? On there? Like, yo, I feel like Jay-Z's swag was at the height of his career. But I felt like lyrically, he had been better on The Dynasty and on S. Carter. I just felt like he was just a better MC. Like, I felt like he bragged more on The Blueprint, but I loved it. The records, the beats, probably, well, Hola Ovito, I know most people don't like that record, but it's another one of them albums, man. The Takeover was crazy. Beats, the songs, the momentum, the Summer Jam screen, like everything behind that album was just dope in itself. Like, cannot debate it. For Nas, we got The Lost Tapes. Just put it right up there. This is crazy. The Lost Tapes, if you don't know, by Nas, especially if you're a new fan of Nas and you watching this like, yo, I want to just get the whole discography. Right after you get Illmatic, you should be buying The Lost Tapes. B-sides, unreleased records, a lot of the records that were supposed to appear on I Am and Nostradamus that were bootleg. Also, some were supposed to appear on Godson, which I kind of skipped, but we're going to get that in there. This is just dope records from Nas that you can't get on any other of the albums. Some of his best music. So The Lost Tapes is a classic. Most hip-hop heads agree with that, hands down. Now for Jay, the next joint, what we got for Jay, the next joint? Let's just get into Jay-Z Unplugged. This shit was okay. This shit was okay to me. I did not really care for it. When I went to college, and Jay-Z wasn't popping like that when I first went to college. I went to college in 95, and in 96 is when Jay started to pop. So 96, 97, even 98, I saw Jay-Z perform at least 4 times, being at parties, clubs, homecomings, or whatever. And I always said his shows are terrible beyond the rhymes, right? Because when it came to rapping, Jay did his thing, but that was just it. So I couldn't imagine this being entertaining or anything different from what we heard, because Jay usually didn't do anything different when he performed lyrically. Like, he didn't recite it differently or whatever. It's fine, but not one of my favorites. But I don't feel strong enough about it to say it was just garbage, because that's not true. Next up for Nas, we got Godson. And I feel like Godson was... Oh, I did it again. If you're listening, I just keep moving the mouse too far. I feel like Godson was a dope album. I feel like Godson following Stillmatic in the momentum, because you come back from an album like Nostradamus, you have Stillmatic, everybody, like you're on top of the world. Everybody is Nas, Nas, Nas again. You come out with Godson, and it's the perfect counterpunch to what Stillmatic was. Stillmatic was a lot of energy, a lot of bravado, flash, New York, King of New York style, whereas Godson was more settling in after victory. You know what I'm saying? And that's kind of what it felt like. That's what it sounded like. And I thought it was a pretty dope album, man. A lot of dope records on there. Next for Jay, we got The Blueprint 2. Jay's double album. And I gotta say, this shit was okay. Now, the only reason why I say that, and I know they did a Blueprint 2.1, but we're not counting those. We're gonna be fair, because we're doing the same for Nas, but we're gonna be fair. When I heard the Blueprint 2.1, Blueprint 2, like most hip hop heads, my first reaction was they should have cut some of them records off and we'd have another classic album. Period. Jay coming off of the battle, not feeling great. Rockefeller situation looking shaky with the Cam stuff and all of that. And Jay gives us a double album. When I heard it was a double album, I was excited because I'm like, oh, Jay about to go in. He got records. They're going to be hit after hit, bar after bar. And this album is spotty. Like, it's some great tunes on there. It's some really dope joints. But, man, it's a really skippable album. Like, I was skipping all over the place. So, this shit is okay. Next up, what we got? What was next for Nas? Next for Nas was this joint, Street's Disciple. This shit is okay. Now, originally when I first heard Street's Disciple, I was like, nah, this is good. But then I started to feel more like, I'm gonna skip these records. It was something I think. Again, like I said, with Stillmatic, bringing the energy back, the bravado, Nas is back, blah, blah, blah. Godson is like, yo, I won. And then Street's Disciple was like, where you going? Where you going with this? You know what I'm saying? Like, he probably should have ratcheted it up a little bit more, but he didn't. Don't get me wrong, there's some really dope records on here, but nevertheless, not one of his greatest pieces of work at all, in my opinion. So the shit is just okay. Next up, let's see, for Jay-Z, what was next for Jay? Next up for Jay, how could I forget? The Black Album. I feel like the Black Album is, and this is in hindsight, a good album. Now, I say that because I played the Black Album a lot when it dropped. Never believed that Jay was actually going to retire. But over time, it is just not an album that I go back to. And I think that's because I felt some kind of way about, I don't know, it was like the energy of this album. Now, there's a number of dope records on here, obviously, and hits off of this album. And I feel like this album was the introduction to the Jay-Z we know today that some traditional Jay-Z fans do not like. Like, I felt like Jay was thinking about being bigger and better at this point and was ready to shed his past. But nevertheless, good doesn't mean it's whack. It's a good album. That's just how I feel. It's good. I just don't feel like it's that great. Next for Nas, Hip Hop is Dead. I'm gonna, it's, Hip Hop is Dead. This shit's garbage, fam. All right. Maybe that's too drastic. This shit is okay. I was so excited for Hip Hop is Dead. The radio was flooded with so much whack music, and I couldn't believe it. And I was just like, oh, man. Then I'm like, oh, Nas is making an album called Hip Hop is Dead. He's burying it. It's going to be great. And you talk about skippable tracks. Jesus. You talk about an album I don't go back to at all. I don't think, I almost forget that Hip Hop is Dead exists. I can't say it's hot garbage because if you gave me a choice between that and Nostradamus, I will listen to Hip Hop is Dead till I'm dead. You know what I'm saying? So this shit is okay. As you can see, there's a slow decline happening here, but we must carry on, right? Next up, Jay-Z. This joint. What was this called? Superman? Something like that? Well, whatever. It was trash. Kingdom Come, to me, was trash because Jay's sound rusty. Remember, he retired, wasn't coming back, goodbye. But now Superman's alive. This album, to me, had maybe 2 or 3 records I like, tops. This is the Jay-Z whack album. Not in my lifetime. Kingdom Come. I know some people who like it, but again, remember, there's that separation between Jay fans started around that Black Album time, and this was more new Jay than old Jay lyrically, and it felt like it was a little rusty. Also, the lyrics wasn't hitting the way they used to, so albums is garbage to me. Point blank. Period. That's all I got to say. Next up, let's go to the compilations. Let's just throw them in there to get them out the way. Nas, Distant Relatives. I'm going to say this is hot garbage. I know some people like this record. And okay, that was a little drastic. I don't think it's that bad. It ain't that bad. This shit is okay. The only reason why I feel this way about this album is because, to me, Nas sounds uncomfortable over these beats. It sounds unnatural. It sounds forced in a couple of situations. Maybe it's not, but it doesn't sound good. What we like about Nas is not just his voice and his subject matter, but we like how he rhymes over beats. Typically, when he has a really dope track for him and he rhymes, it's flawless. Distant Relatives, the music was great, but except for when Nas was rhyming over it. And I listened to this album maybe twice, and I was like, I cannot do it. This is not working. So yeah, I don't feel like it's garbage, because I got to look at these garbage albums and I'm like, for what it was, but I just think performance-wise, it just wasn't great at all. Watch the Throne. I feel like Watch the Throne is a dope album. Kanye West, Jay-Z, even though I feel like Kanye West kind of out-rapped Jay-Z on this album, nevertheless, I listened to a lot of records off of here. And even when I go back, I'm like, man, this album's kind of dope, man. They probably should have did a part 2. Not classic at all, but definitely a great collabo between Kanye West and Jay-Z. Next up, he be going Nas's Untitled. This shit was okay. I gotta be honest. I was expecting so much more from this album, and it just did not deliver. It just didn't. You know what I'm saying? And especially from somebody like Nas, who had the capacity to rhyme about conscious material and content, and it just fell flat in a lot of cases. There's some records on there that are on point, but there's some head scratches on there that's like, this contradicts this entire album. And there's some stuff on there where I'm just like, who made the beat? Like some really terrible stuff. But we got to move on. I'm noticing another album's missing. Let's fix that real quick. And just like that, all is well with the world. Next up, Jay-Z's Blueprint 3. I feel like this shit is okay. It's okay. I really liked it when it came out. I really, really liked it, but it has not aged well. It felt like another version of The Dynasty and another version of what was I going to say? Hard Knock Life, with a ton of guest appearances. Death of Auto-Tune definitely was worth every piece of what it was. Absolutely. Also, remember with the order, just in case somebody say, how you going to skip over? The order is going to be all kind of screwy, because as we get later, I just couldn't remember where certain things came out. But since we at it, we might as well. Another Jay-Z album, American Gangster. Put that in the classic category. It was Reasonable Doubt too, to be honest. It just was. It was the same vibe, feeling, lyrics. It just worked. It as an album, especially an album that accompanied a movie that's better if you have the director's cut. To be honest, I feel like American Gangster is a classic, and I think it's the I think some people say that was Jay-Z's last classic album, and that just might be the case when you look at my tier list. Next up, Nas's Life is Good. This was a dope album. This was another feeling of Nas is back. You know what I'm saying? Like, again, he had a string of not so great albums in a row that made us feel like, yeah, Stillmatic was it. And that was that was the last we'd hear from something really dope from Nas. And then he drops Life is Good, and it was perfect. Perfect timing, perfect records, man. There's so many dope tracks on there. You forget what's hot and what isn't. So it is what it is. Jay-Z's Magna Carta Holy Grail. I think this is a good album. I like this album. I was digging this album. I was rocking it. I like the first half of this album. I feel like the first half of this album is extremely strong. And then I think it starts to dip towards the end and it gets a little spotty. But nevertheless, I feel like it's one of Jay-Z's better albums in modern times. Next up was Nas's last release, produced entirely by Kanye West, called Nasir. And I feel like this shit was just okay. I'm not mad at it. I didn't think it was good because I felt, again, like with Distant Relatives, Nas sound uncomfortable on some of those tracks. And the whole feel of the album was so uncharacteristic from what we come to expect from a good Nas project. This is coming off of Life is Good. Sure, he can't match that, but it was a sidestep. It wasn't, he didn't fall down or become whack. I just thought it was a sidestep, and it just wasn't what most of us expected. And lastly, Jay-Z's last solo album, 444. I feel like this is a good album. A dope album. Now, that's debatable. Some people don't like the way Jay-Z's flowing on it. Some people don't like some of the tracks on there. I loved it because it was different from Jay, like flow-wise, different from any album Jay-Z has ever done. It's almost like he's rhyming, but he's also doing spoken word. Also, this is Jay-Z's most personal album, because Jay didn't mind telling you about how much he sold in 88 and stabbing Un, and how much money he got and which liquor he's supporting. This was more personal. This was more to the guy we all know, but he never really touched upon it in his lyrics. From his family, well, let me put it this way, he touched upon it throughout his albums, but he never really committed to telling his story. And he did that. Stories with his mom's, stories about his wife, and infidelity, and not saying that makes a good album, but I think for at this point in Jay's career, that was perfect. You know what I'm saying? So I enjoyed it. So let's see. Jay-Z and Nas, as far as I'm concerned, have 3 classic albums apiece. Nas has Illmatic, Stillmatic, and The Lost Tapes. Jay-Z has Reasonable Doubt, The Blueprint, and American Gangster. And then they have a couple of dope albums. The dope albums being Nas's It Was Written, Jay-Z's In My Lifetime, Jay-Z's Hard Knock Life, Nas's Godson, Watch the Throne, Jay-Z and Kanye West, Nas's Life is Good, and Jay-Z's 444. As far as good albums in a catalog, Nas's I Am, Jay-Z's S. Carter, Jay-Z's The Dynasty album, Jay-Z's The Black album, and Jay-Z's Magna Carta Holy Grail. And then in the this shit is okay category, the one was category, Jay-Z's Unplugged album, The Blueprint 2 by Jay-Z, Nas's Streets Disciple double album. Blueprint 2 was also a double album. Nas's Hip Hop is Dead, Distinctive Relatives with Nas and Stephen Marley, I believe. I think that's the Marley that's on there. Nas' Untitled, Jay-Z's Blueprint 3, and Nas' Nasir. And In the Garbage, Complete Trash Whack. Both of them only have one album, and that's Nas' Nostradamus and Jay-Z's Kingdom Come. What do you think about my list? What's your list? This tier will be available on my Twitter, and you can check it out. My Twitter and my Instagram. You can just look for Vegas World INC on Instagram and Twitter. And if you do Facebook, visit facebook.com/hiphop right now, where you'll also see the template. And I want to give a big shout out to Tier Maker for allowing me to make this list. And if you want me to make another list, leave your comments in the comment section below. Also, check out my podcast, Hip Hop Nap Podcast, about hip hop news. Is available wherever you listen to podcasts. All you have to do is search for Hip Hop Now Podcast. Hit that subscribe button, like button, and more importantly, share this content with people who you know would enjoy it. Until next time, y'all. Peace. Drop it on them random.